Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Grantara Srimad-Bhagavatam ki Jai. Shri Bhramara Gītā ki Jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Gaur Puran. So, Pranam to all from Sri Gopinath Gaudiya Math in Chakratirtha, Sri Jagannath Puri. I'm sending my greetings, affectionate Dandavat to each one of you from India this time, as you can see. So, and as you can see as well, or as you can guess, I'm not sharing this recording live, unfortunately, because of the difference of timings, being in India in connection to other countries like the US and some other countries. So unfortunately, from here on till the rest of our series, I will be sharing our remaining sessions on Bhramara Gītā in this particular way. So I hope you may forgive me for not being able to be with you live and direct, but somehow or other we are there in spirit. So from the land of Sri Jagannath, we are starting today meeting number 19, our song of the Bumblebee. We are in the conclusion series of lectures, 4 conclusive lecture today, where we will be studying verses 53 till 60 of chapter 47 of the 10th canto of the Grantara Srimad-Bhagavatam. But as usual, let's begin first of all by doing some recap concerning what we studied last Monday. Third conclusive meeting on the Sri Bhramara Gītā, where we studied verses 38 to 52, which mostly included gopis' reply to Krishna's message through Uddhava. In the previous lecture to that one, we studied the first verse, the first reply of the gopis, and in the remaining verses of the previous lecture, we studied all the remaining part of their answer. So different gopis speak here from different groups, which basically mean different emotional dispositions are there in each one of the verses. For example, that's very clear from the first verse in connection to the remaining ones. In the first verse, one gopi from one particular group, more right-wing, if you will, Dakshinabha, which is more submissive nature, will say, it is good that Kamsa was killed and Krishna is therefore happy living in Mathura, and therefore if he's happy, his happiness is our happiness. So which kind of, again, connects more with a right-wing, submissive type of gopi. After that, mostly of the other verses will be spoken by different gopis from left-wing groups, if you will. For example, next one gopi, I will briefly share this, of course, as usual, not enter into details. But one of the gopis in a jealous mood is imagining how Krishna is reciprocating with the Mathura ladies and how he's allured by the finesse, to say, like aristocratic mannerism and gestures. And therefore, the implication is he has forgotten Braj, rustic Braj altogether. So the question will be then, at least does Krishna remember us? When he speaks with those Mathura ladies about how rustic we are, does he recall, for example, the Rasa-lila nights that he had with us? And basically, when the gopis are asking this, they are suffering extremely, not because of their own experience, of their own suffering, because their suffering is not their own, because they are totally immersed in self-forgetfulness. So the suffering is because they know that actually no one in Mathura is able to provide Sri Krishna with the type of Brajabhav, the type of pleasure and love that it is only available in the land of Braj. And so that's a real cause for their suffering. We know that Krishna is not receiving full service, full comprehensive divine love and pleasure as he used to do in Braj. Then another group of gopis will ask, will Krishna return to Braj and save us from the forest fire of separation? Why? But why will he come after having obtained a kingdom, a position there, and so many things that before he didn't obtain in Braj, but now that he obtained them, who knows if he will be detached from that. Another group of gopis will ask, but who are we to provide something to him who is self-satisfied, who is known as Atmaram? Although we know that on top of that, Krishna is Pararam, or divine dissatisfaction in the context of ever-increasing prem, especially the prem of Braj. Then another group of gopis will say the greatest happiness is to renounce everything, to embrace a detachment like the prostitute Pingala, but we cannot. We are not able to detach our minds from Krishna, which they see as their lack of adhikar. We want, but we cannot. Actually, they do not want, and they cannot. And that's why they cannot. The whole sense, that whole mind-body complex is totally composed of love for Krishna, Ragatmika. And then the gopis start to get immersed into different pastimes of Krishna in Braj, since everything in Braj is udipana, or stimulant for the gopis. Earth, water, fire, ether, everything is serving Krishna, and therefore everything reminds them of him. Whenever the gopis see a tree, any species of animal, a vine, the land, soil, dust, everything is conscious entities totally dedicated for the pleasure of Hari. And especially they find great udipana or stimulant by seeing the footprints of Krishna in Braj. They express this in these verses, which are preserved even after he went to Mathura. Then other gopis will say, on top of that, we have his reminders of his walking, smile, glances, confidential talks with us. All this is impossible to forget. It has created such deep, unforgettable samskars in us. So finally, the very last verse of the gopis' reply to Krishna's message, there the gopis take shelter, if you will, like they did at the end of the Bhramara-gita, in Nam Kirtan, calling Krishna with many names, many of them connected with Nath, Ramanath, Brajanath, which means master, or master of Sri Radha, or master of Vrindavan. "Oh, Master of Gokul, Brajanath, please come and save Gokul from the ocean of distress. The whole Gokul is drowning in an ocean of distress. The gopis here are forgetting about themselves and praying to Krishna, please come and save Gokul. Please come and save your Gokul, your Braj." So today, after this intense reply of the gopis to Krishna's message, we will see Uddhava's reply to this, Uddhava's reaction, not only to the Bhramara-gita he has witnessed first from Sri Radha, but then this second, if you will, Bhramara-gita in the form of the reply of different gopis from different groups to Krishna's message to them. And this reply from Uddhava, which will consist mostly of 6 prayers, is also called Uddhava-gita. In the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, we find almost the whole canto is about Krishna instructing Uddhava, very similarly to how he instructed Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, but according to Uddhava's own disposition. So this section is called Uddhava-gita in the 11th canto. But there is the second Uddhava-gita, which is the song of Uddhava, the 6 verses that he invokes. Of course, for sure there must be more, but these 6 appear in the Bhagavatam before leaving Braj. So this is called Uddhava-gita, and today we will start studying the first 3 of them. But before that, even we will see some other verses when Sukadeva Goswami takes the word and starts to give some context to the narrative to Raj Parikshit. So we will start with the first of the different verses we will see today, verse 53 of chapter 47 of the 10th canto. So again, Sukadeva Goswami takes the lead here and says like this. Sukadeva Goswami continues, Adoksaya's messages having relieved their fever of separation, the gopis then worshipped Uddhava, recognizing him as none different from Krishna. This is an interesting verse, an interesting choice of words and name for Krishna, Adokshaya. We will see the many possibilities of this. So here to say that the different messages of Krishna, Adokshaya, relieved the fever of separation from the gopis. And after being thus relieved, the gopikas worshipped Uddhava, recognizing him as none different from Krishna. So let's see what our commentators have to reveal in this connection. As usual, following the lead of Sanatana Goswami, Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhupada, Srila Sridhar Swami, and Vishwanath Chakravarti. So Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, his Sarartha Darshani, he says that when out of sorrow, the gopis' hopes for Krishna's return grew dim and they became eager for death, Uddhava made them happy by speaking different, very confidential matters. This is the significance of the word tata. Tata is the first word of this verse, which means then or after that. So indicating something in connection to something that happened just before this. So in other words, as we will see, Vishwanath will suggest that apart from the official messages that Krishna sent to the gopis that are present in the Bhagavatam, there are some other verses which are the ones who finally were able to relieve the gopis. So Sri Vishwanath mentioned that the gopis were relieved of the fire of separation by other messages which were not different from the previous confidential messages. In other words, they were sent by Krishna and shared by Uddhava. So when they hear these messages that are not appearing officially in the Bhagavatam, but we will see that Vishwanath Chakravarti will reveal through his trance some of them, then the gopis became satisfied. And Vishwanath continues that although Sukadeva has not described those messages, one can understand them by the results that they had on the gopis. In other words, here the verse mentions that the gopis had the fever of separation being relieved, which we don't see that was happening in the reply they presented towards Krishna's message that we just summarized and restudied from our previous class. They still were totally afflicted by separation and crying out his names and asking him for coming. But suddenly in the next verse, Sukadeva Goswami said, the messages of Krishna relieved the fever of separation. So Vishwanath Chakravarti then concludes, some other messages must have been in between. So again, this is the way our Goswamis read the Bhagavatam, trying to make sense of every single verse and space between verses and reading, making reading the whole text, studying, relishing, entering into the whole text with an emotional sense of emotional intelligence, if you will, emotional divine common sense. So then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur will share some of those invisible, in between the line messages. One of them says, Krishna is saying to the gopis according to Sri Vishwanath, "O woman, most dear to my life, close your eyes in front of Uddhava, who has been sent by me. Just as the cowherd boys closed their eyes and were delivered from the forest fire," we know that famous pastime. "Similarly, you closing your eyes, I will deliver you from the forest fire of separation. Just see my power of yoga." So hearing this, the gopis close their eyes. In a flash of a second, Vishwanath continues, Yogamaya brought forth millions of years of time, and in that expanse of time, Krishna performed his rasa dance, playing dice, drinking liquor, water pastimes, and swing pastimes, so that the gopis forgot the pain of separation completely. So one of the many messages imply this type of experience for the gopis, which takes them to be relieved from the pain of separation. Then Vishwanath continues saying, seeing that the gopis were filled with bliss, Uddhava said, "Now, ladies, open your eyes." The gopis opened their eyes and recognized that they had taken a new birth through the bestowal of 1,000-fold bliss when they had closed their eyes. It's not that they were reborn literally, but they were on the verge of death, remember, about to die because of separation. So a new birth was conferred on them by the darshan, by the connection, by the vision of Krishna, the experience of Lila with him. And then Vishwanath explains why the name Adokshaya was given here. Adokshaya, which generally means he who is beyond mind and senses, also can mean Ada, Aksha, Ja. Ada means downward, Aksha means eyes, Ja means birth. So Ada means downward and Aksha means eyes. Putting their eyes downward by closing their eyes, Ja, birth. They have a new birth, as he has just mentioned. That's why the name Adokshaya, according to Sri Vishwanath, is mentioned here. And after this, they worshipped Uddhava by giving such messages that finally relieved them from the fire of separation. Then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur cannot contain himself and shares another message from Krishna to the gopis. Just in case Krishna sends something else. And he says, "O woman filled with prem, if you still are trying to give up your life, just listen." Just in case Krishna sends his message, knowing that the gopis may again fall into an ocean of separation. "Do not doubt that hearing of your death, I also will give up my life. Swearing 1,000 times, I say that you should remain alive. Though I'm trying to go to Braj at every moment, I am unable to go. I fear that it is because of the time, karma, prem, whose characteristics have been explained, or some other obstacle." So Krishna again here shows his empathy towards the experience of the gopis. If you are thinking about dying, the mere news about your death will cause my own death, he's saying. And of course, we know nobody will die, nor Krishna nor the gopis. In Indian drama, there is no tragedy. There are other rasas that can be experienced, but tragedy is not considered because at the end of the day, everything is lila, one form of another, one type of lila or another. So there is no need of tragedy, if you will. So Krishna mentions to them, somehow or other, although you have experienced union with me in the aprakat prakash, remember these terms, in the invisible dimension where there is permanent union, even on the prakat prakash, the manifest dimension of Bhoma Vrindavan, I'm trying over and over again to get rid of this bureaucracy and diplomatic stuff in Mathura and join you. But somehow or other, different obstacles are coming in my way. But believe me, I'm on my way there. As we know, that will happen. Krishna eventually will return to us. And he expresses himself in terms that may sound weird. Because of time or karma, I cannot join you. And you say, how he's tied to karma? Of course, Krishna is not tied to karma. Krishna is not tied to time. He's time personified. But he's executing his Nara-lila, his human-like drama on earth. So in this way, both he and the gopis of Raj sometimes behave, express themselves as if they were, again, conditioned souls, uncivilized village people, which all of which gives this flavor of humanity that, amongst other advantages, creates this emotional bond with us humans on earth and allow us to enter this transhuman, trans-psychological, trans-emotional reality of the Vraja-lila. So Vishwanath continued mentioning that by such messages, like the ones we have shared, the pain of separation of the gopis, which was caused by their thinking that Krishna had no love for them, was totally dissolved. Because they realized that Krishna is loving us, he's suffering as we are suffering for him, he's trying to return. And here the word Atmanam has different meanings. Not only they saw Uddhava as Krishna himself, of course not in a personalist way, but because of how much Krishna manifested himself through Uddhava in the form of through Uddhava's words, through the message that Uddhava was bearing. But also Atmanam can mean that the gopis recognize Krishna as similar to themselves, in the sense that Krishna is also himself afflicted by pain of separation, as the gopis are. There is a corresponding experience of both sides. The gopis are having full experience of this here. Or also the word Atmanam can mean that the gopis recognize Krishna as their very life. Atma, Anam. Atma means own here, and Anam means breath or prana. He's their praneshwar, their prananath. Adokshaya here can mean also the owner of all of their senses. As we know, the gopis, especially those in Madhurya Bhav, Parakya Bhav, their offering to Krishna is in the form of their own bodies and senses in the context of romantic seva. So the name Adokshaya is pretty much proper here as well. So after this, again, they worship Uddhava. So the gopis say, according to Vishwanath at the end of his purport, "O Uddhava, you have spoken well. Even though it is difficult for us, we will remain alive. If you had not given this message, we will have died, and everything would have been destroyed. You have done a good act by fulfilling our desire to protect everyone, and thus we worship you." So the gopis worship Uddhava, appreciate the message of Krishna, remain alive somehow, others struggling by having these different realizations connected to Krishna, and show their gratitude, saying, without this reassurance you have given us, or Krishna has given us through you, we will have died. And if we die, the whole Braj dies. If Radha dies, all the gopis die, and all the Braj die, all Vrindavan will die. And we have been praying, as we remember in the previous class, praying for Krishna, please come and save your Gokul. So by sharing us this message, you have protected everyone here in Braj, and therefore we worship you. Srila Jiva Goswami, on another side, in his Krishna Sandarbha, he has quoted this section and analyzed some of its verses. He mentions that the gopis, instead of realizing Uddhava as non different from Krishna, as one of the overt meanings of the verse imply, Jiva Goswami mentions that the gopis realized themselves and Krishna in precise correspondence with the manner in which they had been instructed by him. What does this mean, basically? That the gopis realized themselves and Krishna as situated, as united in the aprakat prakash, in the state of eternal union, what we have just explained before. Permanent union in the invisible dimension. They have this realization, and therefore their agony was over. It is for this reason, basically, so I had one problem with the recording here, that Uddhava informed the gopis prior to reading Krishna's letter that this message that he was about to give, this he said in verse 28, before giving the message, he said to them, this letter will bring you delight. Because he knew, eventually, or he didn't know maybe, but Krishna knew. And Uddhava had full faith in what Krishna knew. So he knew by the gopis reading Krishna's letter, that will bring them delight. Their hearing this message will converge in the realization of their permanent union in the aprakat prakash. Because beside the gopis' awareness of eternal union, it is said that nothing else could have brought consolation to the gopis' hearts. And Srila Jiva Goswami concludes on his own side, mentioning the name, explaining the name Adokshaya from yet another perspective, mentioning that this name Adokshaya, which generally means he who lies beyond the perception of the senses, therefore, in connection to the constant union of Krishna and the gopis in the Aprakat Prakash, Adokshaya can mean here then, can be taken as an indirect reference to Krishna within the Aprakat Prakash, which is itself beyond the range of perception, it's the invisible dimension. Krishna being there, united with the gopis. So, let's go to the following verse. Verse 54. Shukadev Goswami continues his narrative to Raj Parikshit. He says, Uddhava remained there, Vrindavan, for several months, dispelling the gopis' sorrow by chanting the topics of Sri Krishna's pastimes. Thus, he brought joy to all the people of Gokul. So Srila Sanatana Goswami Pad, in his own Brihad Vaishnava Tulshani commentary, he mentioned that Uddhava stayed in Braj for several months, sharing Krishna's messages to each inhabitant of Gokul and making them happy by it. He mentioned that approximately Uddhava remained in Vrindavan for 10 to 11 months, so almost a year, experiencing great blissful chamatkar or astonishment, which is described as the essence of rasa, rasa sar chamatkar. Even though for Uddhava this meant that he had to be separated from the lotus feet of Krishna. And Krishna was dearer to Uddhava than more than billions of his life hairs, sometimes it is described. So how was Uddhava able to deal with separation from Krishna so much time? Well, by having darshan of the bhakti, by the love of the prem of the Brajavasis, and by finding Krishna in the prem of the Brajavasis. Remember, Krishna is there most present, and there is prem for there. There's no place where there is more prem for Krishna than in Braj. So by discovering this prem of Braj, Uddhava was also rediscovering Krishna, getting to know a new side of Krishna that was unknown to him outside of Braj and Mathura and so on. So in this way, Uddhava was able to stay without Krishna, if you will, but finding Krishna in a more comprehensive way in the company of the Brajavasis during this almost 1 year Brajabas, residence in Braj. Srila Jiva Goswami, on another side, he comments that Uddhava went to the Brajavasis every day in the morning to visit them like a doctor, destroying the disease of separation to make them understand Krishna's instructions, Krishna's messages, which were shared not only to the gopis, but to every inhabitant, species in Vrindavan. Jiva Goswami clarifies further that he's saying that it is understood that Nanda and Yashoda also received instruction and they had their grief dispelled, and all the other people in Braj, including animals, plants, all of them also perceived Krishna's Spurti manifestation as his direct presence. And they all sang about Krishna's pastimes, and all of them were satisfied. The whole of Braj was brimming with joy. And therefore they became blissful as if they were directly pleasant during the Spurti of his pastimes. So basically here is this verse of the Bhagavatam is showing why the gopis' sorrow was dispelled and all the people of Braja was full with joy. Why? Because they perceived Krishna's presence in Braj. That's the only thing that can bring joy to them and that can dispel their distress. So basically that's the implication of this verse without mentioning what happened by mentioning their distress was dispelled. All of them were fully joyous, and of course the implication was the reason for that through that they were able to find Krishna, feel Krishna present by visiting the different places, as we will see, and recalling and entering into the Lila, having visions of Krishna, engaging in those Lilas with them there. Let's continue with the next verse, 55. It says, all the days that Uddhava dwelt in Nanda's covered village seemed like a single moment to the residents of Braj, for Uddhava was always discussing Krishna. So another verse which further clarifies this notion by, in this case, mentioning which was the subjective experience of the Brajavasis in the company of Uddhava, how time passed to them. Now, 1 year passed as a single moment, which we know indicates deep joy. When we are experiencing something very blissful, time passes quickly, runs. And when we are experiencing something very distressful, 1 second is like a yuga or something. Many verses in Shastra describe this. Yugaitam nimishina. So another way, indirect way in which Sukadeva is narrating, implying the degree of joy that the Brajavasis were experiencing. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments in this connection. How did time pass in a moment in Uddhava's presence? The name Uddhava means extreme bliss. Remember, Uddhava means it's connected with the idea of Utsava, of festival. So therefore, Uddhava, the very presence of Uddhava, the very name of Uddhava mentioned in this verse implies the festival that the Brajavasis were experiencing. And besides this, Krishna had also empowered Uddhava with the capacity to bestow bliss on others. So he himself is bliss personified by his very name, Uddhava. And on top of that, Krishna empowered Uddhava for his mission in Braj to be able to dispel their distress and bestow bliss to all of them. So that was happening now. All of Vrindavan was experiencing union with Sri Krishna. And therefore, this verse mentions, and Vishwanath comments, time passed in a moment for the Brajavasis, who felt extreme happiness in the association of Uddhava, bliss personified. Let's go to verse 56. Still, Sukadeva Goswami continues to elaborate on the experience of Uddhava and the Brajavasis. Till now, he was describing mostly the experience of the Brajavasis, how they felt in Uddhava's association, and by experiencing different types of spurti and the presence of Krishna there. Now, there is a shift, and the emphasis will be connected in how Uddhava felt himself in the association of the Brajavasis, and by being able to render some service to them, to express the mission that Krishna has given to them. So verse 56 says like this. That servant of Lord Hari, seeing the rivers, forests, mountains, valleys, and flowering trees of Raj, enjoyed inspiring the inhabitants of Vrindavan by reminding them of Sri Krishna. So now the focus is how Uddhava is feeling happy and fulfilled by being able to inspire the Brajavasis, by being able to make his mission a success. And one of the indicators here that all of the Vrindavan again was happy and blossoming is it is speaking of flowering trees of Raj. He saw the flowering trees, which means Vrindavan is experiencing union with Krishna, because without the experience of union, the trees are not flowering. The vines are not flowering. Anything, and nothing is flowering in Vrindavan. Everything is, on the contrary, not flowering and dying in separation. So by saying the flowering trees of Braj implies the flowering everything, the flowering rivers and forests and mountains and hearts of Braj. So by seeing this simultaneous blossoming and flowering, Uddhava found so much inspiration. Srila Sridhar Swami in this connection comments that as Uddhava was wandering about in Braj, he reminded the residents of Vrindavan of Krishna by asking them different questions about the pastimes of Krishna, and which pastimes Krishna performed in each one of the Lila stalis, in each one of the places for different Lilas. In the rivers, in the forests, in the mountains, in the valleys, there is no place left unexplored by Krishna in Braj. So in every single spot of Vrindavan, there is some Lila to tell, basically. There is something to connect in relation to Krishna. So in this way, Uddhava himself experienced great Ananda, not only the Brajavasis, but Uddhava himself experienced great Ananda in their association. By doing this Brajamandal Parikram, interestingly, nowadays we know of Brajamandal Parikram, which basically implies visiting the different Lila stalis, spots for pastimes, and narrating the particular Lila happening there. So when Uddhava here is going to Vrindavan and doing this Parikram with the Brajavasis, here the original Brajamandal Parikram is performed. The standard for what we know today as Brajamandal Parikram is established here by Uddhava, being shown the different places of pastime by the Brajavasis. Or sometimes we will see or we will hear that not only the Brajavasis were telling Uddhava about the different places, and he was learning from them. But then Uddhava, sometimes after learning from them, will re-share those pastimes with the Brajavasis, or Krishna himself in the distance will inspire Uddhava with visions of the different leelas enacted in each spot. And he himself was again empowered and able to share different pastimes and share that katha to the Brajavasis and thus nourish them. Srila Jiva Goswami in his commentary mentions something very interesting regarding the term samsmarayam, which appears in this verse. Smara means remembrance, and sam means samyak or complete. So Jiva Goswami mentions that Sri Uddhava Mahasaya made the Brajavasis remember Krishna completely. So what's the meaning of that? Because they already remember Krishna completely at every moment, 24/7. So this means samsmarayam, complete remembrance, means that Uddhava made Krishna appear directly before to the Brajavasis, in front of the Brajavasis. They experienced direct presence and contact with Krishna by absorption in his lila. And therefore Uddhava was satisfied. So this absorption in lila is very crucial. This usage of our mind to visualize what's going on. Actually, we ourselves, on some level or another, should engage in this form of smaran. With smaran, there's place for imagination, interestingly. One thing is imagination, another thing is mental speculation. So we should have a disciplined imagination, I will say, contextualized imagination, according to what we hear from Shastra, according to the parameters that revelation is giving to us. There is place for imagining, to letting ourselves visualize what we are hearing about in the context of what we are hearing about from revelation, and try to feel something for those things that we are visualizing. And that's the crucial part of smaran, the different types of smaran that Raganuga Bhakti is about. On the other side, mental speculation has to be with fantasy and wishful thinking without any Shastric parameter. So it's important to make this point here for us as Raganuga sadhakas. There is place for discipline, contextualized imagination in the context of visualizing whatever Shastra is telling to us. So in this way, Uddhava and the Brajavasis went to the banks of the ponds in Braj, into the woods, to the mountain caves, exploring all these different spots, and seeing the blossoming trees, the blossoming vines, the blossoming Braj. And Uddhava sang to the Brajavasis about the particular pastimes that Krishna had performed in such a way that the Brajavasis were thinking that these pastimes and Krishna himself directly appear before their eyes. That's the ultimate upgraded expression and experience of parikrama. Not only I'm walking and visiting a place, doing tourism, geographically moving here and there, but it's an internal moving that eventually converges into a vision and a participation of those things we are hearing about. Again, because of this is so crucial to have a proper sense of imagination regarding our smarana, our shravan, what we hear about, how that takes shape in our mind. In this way, Uddhava was taken by gopis and gopas in Braj in Parikram, hearing Lila Katha about Krishna, about each of the pastimes that Krishna enacted in each one of the different spots in Braj. And it is said that Uddhava at this point was crying profusely, experiencing a new type of love in connection to the one he already had. Of course, as we know, it's not that he became a Brajavasi per se. Here he's a Nitya Siddha and he has a Sthayi-bhav, permanent mood towards Krishna. But somehow he's a very unique case of a Nitya Siddha having a permanent mood. And that permanent mood somehow becomes upgraded by association with the Brajavasis. He doesn't become a Brajavasi himself, but his own bhava for Krishna becomes, let's say, ornamented, sweetened, nourished in the association of the Brajavasis, as he will pray, as we will see next class, to be further affected by the intensity of the love of the gopis, which doesn't mean he wants to become a gopi himself, but he wants to imbibe some level of the passionate feelings they have for him. So in this way, Uddhava was just like totally ecstatic and wandering for a year in Braj like an intoxicated person, like a drunkard. Remember in the very beginning of the Bhramara-gita, verse 1 of the Bhramara-gita, Sri Radha is criticizing the bumblebee. For a minute, we'll go back to connect with this. She's criticizing the bumblebee as calling him Madhupa, which means a drunkard. And Krishna is also, she says, a Madhusudan, another bumblebee, another drunkard. You are the servant of a master who is a drunkard. The two of them birds of the same feather flock together. And Uddhava was witnessing all that, shocked by this. But now Uddhava, after hearing the Katha from Shri Radha and the Brajavasi, after having their Sangha, by hearing him, he himself became a drunkard. And now he's wandering in Braj for 1 year, totally intoxicated by having drunk the wine of the Brajavasi's prem, basically. Like a bumblebee, taking the nectar here and there, visiting the different spots of the Krishna's exploits in Braj, buzzing, if you will, like a bumblebee here and there in Braj for almost a year. Like coming and going, up and down, falling, Pivati Bhagavatam, Rasa Amalaya, falling to the ground, drunk, like a drunkard. So he himself now have gone through particular empathy regarding what he was hearing about at the beginning. And then Sukadeva Goswami continues one more verse from Sukadeva before going to Uddhava's official prayers. Thus, seeing how the gopis were always disturbed because of their total absorption in Krishna, Uddhava was supremely pleased. Desiring to offer them all respect, he sang as follows. So, of course, when he says the gopis were always disturbed, doesn't mean this doesn't mean negative sense, but disturbed by the constant invasion of different ecstasies that came from their experience in the union with Krishna. And Uddhava was supremely pleased. Remember, the pleasing of Uddhava is connected to the joy of the Brajavasis, mission successful. So desiring to say something in connection to the darshan he just had, the darshan of the gopis prem, he presented a song, which is called Bhramara-gita. But before going to that, some, of course, words regarding this verse. So, Srila Jiva Goswami mentions that all the different people of Vrindavan had an extraordinary prem. Sri Uddhava is showing that the gopis developed most astonishing type of bhakti. Again, there is some subjective superiority that every devotee will experience as being the highest thing, but objectively speaking, we will see how Uddhava here especially praises the gopis prem as the topmost achievement. So seeing Jiva Goswami, seeing the condition of the gopis, Uddhava sang the following 6 verses, famous 6 verses, which are known as Bhramara-gita. And there Uddhava is praising the gopis with a sweet voice, with full absorption, and every day coming and going, to say that Uddhava remained at some distance from the gopis and he will sing. In other words, he will not get too close to them by some reverence he felt towards their love. So this is a similar idea to what Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta said in his famous poetry, Ujjala Ragavata Gaurava Bhange. We are to worship the path of Raga Bhakti with reverence. It's not that the Raga Bhakti in itself, the path of Raga Bhakti is reverential, but we are to approach such a path of intimate, informal, and deepest love with certain degree of reverence. We are to approach the depth, the charm, the sweetness, the integrity of such a path with certain gratitude and appreciation from a distance. To properly appreciate that and not misunderstand it. And the more we do that properly, the more that the reverence will be breached. Well, the gap will disappear and we will be thrown into that world and become one of them, properly following the footsteps of the inhabitants of Vrindavan in every sense of the term, following the Ragatmikas. So somehow Uddhava is showing that point here, offering reverence and pranam in this series of verses in this Bhramara-gita, offering reverence to the passionate love of the gopis, establishing this important standard of what's Raga Noga Bhakti. Srila Sridhar Swami, in his own commentary, Bhavartha Deepika, he mentions that Uddhava, it is said that he will sing this Gita song. So generally you don't sing in loud voice, but you don't sing, in soft voice, but in loud voice. So Sridhar Swami mentions here that Uddhava spoke loudly to show that it was not improper for one of Kshatriya birth, like him, to pay obeisances to mere cowherd girls. In other words, to show that the gopis are not mere cowherd girls, but as we will see, they achieve the highest possible attainment for any living entity. So he's mentioning this in full voice, if you will. He wants to make this point clear. That's, remember, one of the reasons why Krishna sent Uddhava, not any other person, to Vrindavan, because Uddhava was already famous as a great scholar, pandit, devotee. He had all good qualities. So if someone like him loudly and clearly proclaims the ultimate glory of the gopis' love, that then must be taken seriously as a fact. So that's why he will tell all this singing in loud voice. So the whole world, us included, can appreciate and hear his points. And Srila Sanatana Goswami, before going to the first verse of the Uddhava Gita, he comments saying that desiring, he offers a very nice prayer here. We'll find Uddhava trying to enter into the following verses, so we join him into this prayer as well. So he says, desiring to understand the meaning of his words, of Uddhava's words, I surrender to excellent Uddhava, the best of the devotees who understood the greatness of the gopis. So of course, we will see that Uddhava is the best of the devotees, but he's praising the gopis as the best of the devotees. So it's another way of saying he's the best of the devotees because he was able to recognize who are the best of the devotees, the Braja Gopikas in this case. So because of his solid reputation as a very exalted Vaishnava, Uddhava's testimony that the bhakti of the gopis is supreme, basically is extremely credible. And again, that's an important point Krishna wants to make. And Krishna himself, it is said that when he left this manifest world, he closed his lila, he asked to Uddhava, please remain on earth for some time and spread what I've taught to you. So ultimately, he's asking Uddhava, this is the highest point and converging point of what Krishna is wanting to teach to Uddhava. So he's asking Uddhava, remain in this world and spread this experience you have had in Braj, basically. So, that said, we will go to the first verse. Where of the 6 verses today, we will see 3 of these 6 verses that make the Uddhava Gita, the 6-fold prayer of Uddhava. So the first verse is verse 58. I will recite them in Sanskrit in this case, since they are very special and beautiful. Some time back, I have given some series of lectures, but I think only in Spanish, of these 6 verses, spending 1 class per verse, trying to give a more comprehensive explanation. These verses are quoted also by Srila Sanatana Goswami at the end of his Srimad-Bhagavatam, when he is presenting a compilation of verses from the Bhagavatam about the glories of Gopi Bhava, and of course these 6 verses are selected. So, let's begin with the first one. It says like this. Gita param chanvrito vidupa bhavu Gudindaivam kilasma nirupa bhavu Vanchanti yat bhava viyunayopayantu Kindrama janmabhiv ananta kathara satyam. Sri Uddhava says, singing with tears in his eyes, among all persons on earth, these cowherd women alone have actually perfected their embodied lives, for they have achieved the perfection of unalloyed love for Govinda. Their pure love is hankered after by those who fear material existence, by great sages, and by ourselves as well. For one who has tasted the narrations of the infinite Lord, what is the use of taking birth as a high-class Brahmana, or even as Lord Brahma himself? So again, this verse is very beautiful and contains many points, conclusive points of our Siddhanta of Raga Bhakti, for the supremacy of Raja Bhakti as the ultimate conclusion that the Bhagavatam wants to bestow. So we will share some of the main ideas here. So here Uddhava is declaring that the gopis are greater than all aspirants for liberation, greater than all of the ones who attain liberation, self-realization, and even greater than all of the other devotees of Bhagavan. And he's saying only the gopis, or this goddesses of fortune, who reside in the cowherd village of Nanda Maharaj, have realized the full potential of human life. So if there is some ultimate reach that the Atma can attain embodied in the human form, that is what the gopis have attained. That's Uddhava's own experience. Of course, with this, as usual, we don't want to engage in racism, to be racist in the context of rasa, claiming this is the only thing, the highest thing, and that's all. But as we always say, objectively speaking, there is a hierarchy established in our Shastra, which Mahaprabhu himself mentioned as well. And Gopi Bhav, Radha Dasyam, is considered like the highest reach as potential for a jiva on an objective level. But as we know, due to bhakti samskars, every devotee will feel that their relationship with Krishna is the best, subjectively speaking, and every one of them will be right. So yes, the gopis' attainment is the highest, it's the sweetest, but not everyone likes sweet that much. So even though mango is the sweetest fruit, someone may like more, whatever, bananas or apples. So subjectively speaking, one's own affinity due to previous bhakti samskaras is the best. And objectively speaking, Uddhava is making this important point here to highlight the transcendence of the gopis' love, which may seem as something ordinary. So here the words Tanubrito Bhuvi, or perfecting their lives on earth. Of course, most of the gopis here are Nitya Siddhas. They do not need to attain perfection, but also some of them may sadhana siddhas. That idea may be applicable to them, but also this idea can be understood in another way yet. And it's that by sharing the rare gift of Prem Bhakti, the gopis are delivering the fallen conditional souls on this earth. In other words, as we mentioned before, by they themselves as ragatmikas, establishing a precedent, giving an example to follow to the people of this world, they establish the possibility of this Raganuga Bhakti, which is about following the ragatmikas, the personifications of raga. So by the gopis giving darshan, testimony of their own bhakti, they are spreading in this world the blessing for all the human beings who would like to thread the path of following in the footsteps. In this way, they are perfecting our lives on earth, allowing us to perfect our lives on earth as Raganuga sadhakas. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his own commentary, mentions that Uddhava is singing here that the gopis alone perfected their lives, Tanubrito, by achieving Ruda Bhava. The word Ruda Bhava here means the highest type of Mahabhava, actually, which is desired by those who strive for liberation, Bhavaviyo, by those who are actually liberated, Monayo, and Uddhava says, but devotees such as me, by Amcha. All of us know about that, but we cannot attain that for one reason or another. Like implying this is not an easy thing, an ordinary attainment, even though it may seem ordinary, supra, extraordinary. And of course, here Uddhava in this verse and the rest of the other ones, this first verse kind of gives some context to the remaining ones, sense and precedence. Uddhava considers himself here to be just a sincere servant of Krishna, who can only admire the gopis' prem from some distance, as we mentioned. Some reverence is there. He doesn't feel, I can enter into the shoes of the Raja Gopikas. This is too high for me. He experiences this humility. He's not rushing where angels fear to tread. So we should also draw important lessons from all these. This is not a cheap attainment. Even if we have an attraction in that direction, we should put ourselves in the humblest possible position in front of the highest possible idea. Krishna is described here as Nikilatma, which means the soul, Atma of Nikila, of all. So that can, of course, in a general way, means he's Bhagavan, the absolute Paramatma in every heart. But here, Nikilatma means that each gopi cherishes Krishna as their very life and soul, in the way that other devotees cannot imitate. So again, even the name that is chosen for Krishna here actually is speaking about the gopis, love for him. That's the mode in which Uddhava is singing and praying here. So the way the gopis cherish him, embrace him with their entire self, other devotees is not present in other devotees. That's the Uddhava's particular insight here, ecstatic revelation. Srila Jiva Goswami, on his side, mentions that in this verse, first verse of the Uddhava Gita, he's showing that the gopis are possessed of the most excellent Mahabhav-like bodies. So they do not only have Mahabhav, they are Mahabhav. They do not have Prem, they are Prem. They are Ragatmika. their own self, their own mind-body complex is constituted of raga, of mahabhava, of prema. So their body and soul became one. Or all of them are constituted of mahabhava. So they should not be disrespected, says Sri Jiva, for being women. They shouldn't be just seen as ordinary village girls, but they are the ultimate personifications of the highest type of love. And he says, so what to speak of their bhavas? Just hearing news about them is desired by those who are in liberation and those who are already liberated. Sukadeva Goswami being one prime example in this connection. Admarama Chamunayo. Those who are beyond the entanglement of this world, they are attracted to hearing news about them, to Harikatha. And then the last line of this verse, Kim Brahma Janmavid Ananta Katarastasya. For one who has a taste for narrations of Bhagavan, the infinite Lord, Ananta Katha means narrations about Ananda, he who is unlimited, or unlimited narrations about the unlimited Lord, basically. Because he's unlimited, there's unlimited things we can say about him. So if someone has a rasa, a taste for these narrations, Kim Brahma Janmavi, what's the meaning of being born as a high-class Brahmana? The word Brahma can mean Brahmana, or even can mean Brahmas, we will see. Or without that special bhav, such bodies cannot be attained even by being born as Brahmanas. So if you have a taste, what's the purpose of being a Brahmana? And if you don't have that taste, you cannot reach the stance of the gopis just by being born as a Brahmana. Srila Sanatana Goswami Pad, he comments further here. In this line, last line, what is the use of Brahma's birth, the highest possible birth on the material experience? What's the use of Brahma's birth, his form, his mentality, for someone who has taste for Ananta Katha? Totally inexplicable. And plural is used also in this verse by Uddhava to express respect. Sometimes when you speak about one person, and if you speak in plural to that one person, it implies reverence towards that one person. So again, another way in which Uddhava is showing his reverence. Or Sanatana Goswami says, this means plural to indicate the totality of the gopis who have this type of bhav. Or Sanatana Goswami then continues, what is the use of Brahma's birth without such bhava? What's the purpose of being born as Brahma if you cannot attain this type of bhava? If you are a Brahma who doesn't have a rasa for these topics. So the conclusion basically is someone has no interest in Ananta Katha, what can that person gain by taking birth as the creator of the universe, as Brahma? And if you are born as Brahma, what will you do? What would do that in regard to increasing one's stage for Ananta Katha? Being born as Brahma is not warranted that it will bestow you Ananta Katha rasa. Indeed, another idea for Brahma, apart from being born a Brahmana or as Brahma, Brahma can also refer to Vedic knowledge here. And what is the implication there? That the person who has full realization of Ananta Katha Rasasya, like the Brajavasis and the Gopis, such a person has nothing to gain from Vedic study, theoretical knowledge, Sankhya-like knowledge, like spirit is distinct from matter, all these Upanishadic abstract statements. And for someone who has no Ananta Katha Rasasya, what is the use of Vedic knowledge? Basically, that's the idea. If you have taste for Ananta Katha, what's the meaning of this Vedic statement? If you have no taste for Ananta Katha, what is the use of these Vedic statements? In ecstasy, Uddhava, who's a great knower of Vedic statements, is saying this here. Mahaprabhu himself mentions, Shrotam api Upanishadam dure harikatam. These sounds of the Upanishad, Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, these abstract statements, lie far away from where Sri Harikatha, the Bhagavatam, which describes the emotions of the Brajavasis, from which Harikatha can take us, Ananta Katha. So, Sanatana Goswami concludes that indeed a Rasika Bhakta will consider to be born as Brahma, going back again to the idea of Brahma as the creator of the universe. They consider being born as Brahma as an obstacle to cultivate the taste for Ananta Katha, because birth like Brahma carries the possibility of various distractions, such as becoming proud of being Brahma, which we know that happened. The Bhagavatam made that very clear. And therefore, the gopis, Sanatana Goswami says, intent on tasting the honey found at Sri Govinda's lotus feet. They will rather be born as simple daughters of cowards than as such as exalted being of Lord Brahma. So over and over again, the Bhagavatam is making this point. It's not so important to be born as a Brahmana, to be born as Brahma himself, even to embrace Vedic knowledge, if this is not converging into this idea of Nanta Katara Sasya, Tapum Birdviyashastra, Bhagmasrama Vibhagasa, Sanustitasya Dharmasya, Samsiddhir Haritosha. The ultimate converging point of Varna Ashram is Harikatha. And the ultimate point of being Brahma is surrender, put our head to the feet of the Brajavasa. It happens in the Brahma, happened in the Brahma Vimohan Lila. And the ultimate converging point of all Vedic knowledge is Braj, Harikatha. Let's go to the second verse of these 6 from the Bhramara-gita. Śrīmatī Krishna Chaisa Paramatma Nirudhavada Nāneshvaru Bhajaturva Suryapi Shakshat Shriyastan Vyagada Raja Rupa Uddhav says, verse 59, how amazing it is that this simple woman who wander about the forest, seemingly spoiled by improper behavior, have achieved the perfection of unalloyed love for Krishna, the Supreme Soul. Still, it is true that the Supreme Lord himself awards his blessings even to an ignorant worshipper, just as the best medicine works even when taken by a person ignorant of its ingredients. So another interesting and very ecstatic declaration by Uddhav, with lots of implications to unpack. First of all, we will clarify the most maybe controversial notion here, which is the expression he uses, Vyavichara Dusta, which generally is translated that someone refers to someone corrupted by deviation. So he's speaking about the gopis in that context, some adulterous woman, but he uses the idea in such a way with irony. Now, so seemingly they seem to be corrupted in this context of Parakiya. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur will immediately, and all of our acharyas quickly, clarify what's the intent of Uddhava here. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur first mentioned that there are 3 types of adulterous women, or Vyavichara Dusta ladies corrupted by deviation. The first one is she who enjoys both her husband and a lover, which is the most condemned of all the 3 cases by Shastra and society and sadhus. The second is the lady that abandons her husband to enjoy only with her lover. Although, of course, both society and Shastra also condemn such behavior, at least it may be said, Vishwanath mentions, that that lady has the good quality of dedicating herself to one single man. So it's a little bit less inauspicious, if you will. And the third case, the highest one, and the one that the gopis belong to, this category, is the lady who abandons her husband and enjoys in the attitude of being a lover of Krishna. And it is said, Vishwanath mentioned that all the foolish people criticize this. Such behavior is glorified by Shastra and sadhus, while the other 2 are condemned by Shastra and sadhus. The third one is glorified by them. So in this word, Vyavichara Dusta indicates like apparent resemblance between the gopis' behavior and that of ordinary adulterous woman, while there is an ocean of difference between the 2. That's how Parakiya hides himself. The highest, most sacred and deep love hides itself in the disguise of apparently adulterous love. Interestingly, Srila Jiva Goswami, in connection to the expression Vyavichara Dusta, he says that the word Vyavichara here actually does not refer to a prostitute or to an adult degraded lady, but to the Vyavichari bhavs that the gopis express, that we have seen all along these different songs, such as MB and so on, all of which appear in Parakiya bhav. So Vyavichara Dusta in this case refers to those ladies expressing Vyabhichari Bhakti like the gopis do in Parakya. Srila Sanatana Goswami, on his side, he mentions that in verse 61 that we will see next class, but in that verse, famous verses of Mahocharanari and just Mahamsham, in verse 61, Uddhava aspires for the gopis' love, as we mentioned, not to be a gopi himself, but to be imbibed by the intensity of their love. Since Uddhava is aspiring for that, it is unsuitable that he calls the gopis Vyabhichara, dusta, or contaminated with bad conduct here. And of course, in the previous verse, he also praised them, they attain the highest possible reach of human life and so on. So there has to be another meaning, because it is not possible for such ladies to be degraded. Actually, they are worthy of the highest respect, he says. So therefore, the meaning is this, says Sanatana Goswami. And he applies the meaning. The Sanskrit is applicable to Uddhava, but not to the gopis. And Uddhava is saying, what use are persons like me who are contaminated by not doing proper actions? In other words, he's comparing the stance, the situation, the standing of the gopis and his own. And Uddhava cannot but condemn himself, if you will, by contrast. And Sanatan continues the Prabhu saying that it is obviously with irony that Uddhava speaks these words here. Like, oh, it's so surprising that these degraded ladies, I mean, he's not, of course, speaking to them as such, using this irony to increase the intensity of his expression. He himself here considers himself unqualified to have the company of the gopis. He feels, I have achieved the association of them only when the undeserved mercy of Sri Krishna. His causeless grace took me here. Now Uddhava starts to fully realize more and more, which was the purpose of Krishna sending him to Braj. He's gradually discovering more and more this mission, that Krishna not only had for Uddhava in relation to the gopis, but for the Brajavasis in relation to Uddhava. So Uddhava, by realizing all this, and feelings of seeing such darshan of love, feels himself so small that according to him, compared to the gopis, Uddhava feels himself especially fallen. And here he's not referring to another way in which Uddhava is showing reverence for the gopis is he's not referring to the gopis directly here by saying the gopis, by calling them by name, by using the word imaha, which means these ladies, this woman. So indirectly, speech in this case also indicates the awe and reverence he's feeling in the presence of the gopis bhav, the gopis prem. Also, before going to the last verse we'll sing today, here in this verse the gopis are described as roamers of the forest, like mad women who are wandering in the wilderness of the woods, if you will. So it may seem despective again, no? But actually he's using these terms in a particular way, contrasting again their standing with his. In other words, the intense love that the gopis have for Krishna impels them to wander about the Vrindavan forest, where so many of the pastimes of Krishna are taking place, attracted by that. Even when he's not there, when they are attracted in that direction, to recall of the different leelas, recollect in their mind. And in the agony of separation from Krishna, as we know, the gopis are living in the most secluded part of the Vrindavan forest. They are wandering in the impassable wilderness. And in comparison to the extreme condition, the extreme disposition of the gopis, Uddhava looks at himself and says, my life is nothing like that of the gopis. I'm male, I live in a bustling metropolis where my residence is fixed. I enjoy all comforts there, and therefore I'm unfit to wander about the Vrindavan forest like the gopis do. He feels I'm proud of knowing philosophically who Krishna is in Tattva and Siddhanta, but therefore I cannot gain the topmost treasure, which is the gopis' love for Krishna, this Gyan Sunya Bhakti, where they are not aware about Krishna's divinity by seeing him in terms of intimate affection. In Vrindavan, that's the standard. Say Mora Putra, say Mora Saka, say Mora Pranapati. That's the standard. He's my son, he's my friend, he's the Lord, the lover, my lover, the Lord of my life. So this is teaching for us as well. We are not the gopis and we are not Uddhava either. But we may be attached to so many things that actually at present do not allow us to fully thread this raga mark. How we should think which adjustments we have to continue doing to our life in order to properly, in some increasing level, be more able to thread this path. So Uddhava, with full humility, he's judging himself as a most fallen wretch in comparison to the Gopi. So in a healthy, sustainable way, gradually, this type of experiences should come to us as well. To contrast and compare our present condition with that of the ideal we want to follow and feel deep humility, not to the point of being discouraged and leaving the path altogether, but to fall properly appreciate that with the proper, again, reverence, and in such a way that that will create paradoxically an increased attraction to thread that path. That's a proper combination of feeling ourselves falling, but having greed at the same time. Apanya jokya deki mana pavshova tatapi tumara guna pajaya lobi. Rupa and Sanatan say that when they saw Mahaprabhu. Although we perceive in our mind our lack of qualification, our rascaldomness, at the same time, we cannot avoid feeling attracted and greedy for your qualities. You are so merciful, so beautiful, so sweet. We feel longing for that. Although we know we are so fallen that we do not deserve it, but we need that. That's how grace, causeless grace, the dynamics of causeless grace work. And one example to finish this verse is given here in connection to the Krishna's mercy, how that operates like a powerful medicine that is effective even on patients that are completely ignorant of its properties. The Lord Bhagavan's mercy acts on anyone who comes in touch with them somehow or other. Uddhava says this here, feeling himself how Krishna's mercy is acting on him. Krishna is giving me such causeless grace by giving the association of the Brajavasis. Therefore, Krishna's mercy is acting like a very rare, most potent medicine, which is effective even if not swallowed and digested, but merely brought near the patient and smelled. So Uddhava is feeling the same. Krishna is bringing me close. I cannot swallow or digest this Brajavas, this Brajaprem. This is too much for me. But Krishna is bringing me close to them, putting this medicine for me to be smelled, if you will. Even if I do not understand properly what's going on here, the glory of their love, their mercy, his mercy is such, Krishna, Uddhava is thinking about his master, that he's given me this opportunity for being cured, and not only cured by having a taste for this. So, some ideas of this verse. And with your permission, we will go to the very last verse of today, verse number 60, the third of these 6 verses of the Bhramara-gita to finish our meeting. Uddhava sings, Nayam Shriyam Gauni Tankarati Prasadam Swarbyoshitam Nalinaganda Rucham Kutonya Rasatsavisyabuja Dandagrihi Kanta Labdasi Sanjao Devat Braja Sundari. When Sri Krishna was dancing with the gopis in the Rasa-lila, the gopis were embraced by the arms of the Lord. This transcendental favor was never bestowed upon the gods of fortune or other consorts in the spiritual world. Indeed, never was such a thing even imagined by the most beautiful girls in the heavenly planets, whose bodily luster and aroma resembled the lotus flower. And what to speak of worldly women who are very beautiful according to material estimation? So this is a very nice verse. Again, all of these verses prove the supremacy of Gopi Bhav from different angles of view, points of view. Here, in connection to the supremacy of Rasa-lila, how the Gopis were able to engage in that, how that established them even above Śrīmatī Lakshmi Devi, the famous goddess of fortune, the most chaste lady, and the highest epitome of devotion to God, Narayan. What to speak of other ladies, the Devis in Svarga, material ladies in this world, and so on. So Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his Sarartha Darshini, makes a nice point, speaking as Krishna, about Krishna first, as the best of the avatars. Of course, Krishna is avatari, but also he's an avatar, he's descending. So Sri Krishna, the best of all avatars, he's existing of the highest platform of purity and morality, and thus he always remained praiseworthy by all, even while accepting worldly criticism for his cow tending, wandering in the forest, taking meals with young monkeys, stealing yogurt, and seducing other men's wives. So although some of his behaviors may seem questionable by some, he still remains untouched by lack of morality. He remains in the highest platform of morality and even above that. So similarly to Krishna, the gopis, who are the essence of Krishna's Ladini Shakti, who are the Shakti of Shaktiman, they achieve the highest standard of purity and auspiciousness, even in comparison to that of the goddess of fortune. Even though it may seem questionable, again, their parakia may seem totally worthy of criticism by the eyes of whatever, Puritan views in society and so on. On top of that, their situation is totally beyond all mundane sense of morality. Although Lakshmi Devi, again, Lakshmi is a very important, powerful example in all Vedic literature. Lakshmi is praised and glorified that the highest, again, lady, the highest example of feminine devotion. And here Uddhava is establishing a very Gaudiya point. Radha and the gopis are above Lakshmi. That's a very powerful point. We have to know how to establish that with Sri Vaishnavas, as Mahaprabhu himself did, as we will see. So although Lakshmi is famous as being not only so chaste, but also so dear to Bhagavan, to Narayana, never leaving his feet, his chest, always serving him, she doesn't have the prem that the gopis have. Uddhava is making this point here. Uddhava himself is astonished by reaching such insight that he had not before. He's concluding Mahalakshmi, consort of Lord Narayana, she's famous as his beloved, Lakshmi Pati, he is Sridhara, and so on. But she cannot enjoy the same favor of Bhagavan in the same way as the gopis of Raj. He's making this example, Rasa-lila. Lakshmi is not participating in Rasa-lila. The gopis receive that good fortune. So the supreme goddess of fortune is less fortunate than the gopis. Then what can be said of other ladies who are not the goddess of fortune? Devis of Swarga, so-called beautiful woman in this world, and so on, which is a relative what is beautiful here is not beautiful there, and so on. So he's given this female hierarchy, if you will. Gopis, Lakshmi, Devis, and Swarga, woman from this plane. So the supreme goddess of fortune is not so fortunate, actually. So ultimately, the real goddess of fortune, as we know, is Sri Radha. She's the Adi Lakshmi. And Lakshmi, by contrast, is but an expansion of her. The gopis in Vrindavan are different Lakshmis. Jiva Goswami confirms this point. He says that having conquered all young women headed by Lakshmi, the gopis, who are the eternal consorts of Sri Krishna, are known as the greatest Lakshmis. Sri Brahma himself established this point in his Bhramara-gita, Lakshmi Sahasra Sata Sambrama Sebhyamanam. In Vrindavan, in Golok, we found hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis, the gopis, who are Sambrama Sebhyamanam, who are possessed of a very unique service disposition that it's not even found in Vaikuntha, in Lakshmi. That's the main point. So here, this very Gaudiya point is there. Gopis, Radha are above Lakshmi, which of course has to do with the same idea of Sri Krishna and Braja Krishna. The Golok conception is above Narayana and Vaikuntha in terms of rasa, in terms of bhava. So Jiva Goswami again repeats, if that is so, if Lakshmi is the most chaste lady and the gopis are above Lakshmi, it means the gopis have to be even more chaste than Lakshmi, more pure. So accusations that the gopis had illicit connections must be false. This criticism of the parakia is nonsense, Jiva Goswami implies. The infamy that the gopis received was only an arrangement to reveal their unrestricted prem. Yogamaya creates these dynamics in the Braj to show the ultimate glory of their unrestricted love, Haitukiya Pratihata. Parakia in particular, with all these obstacles that it has to have. Different obstacles, it has to be hidden, and so many things, forbidden love, if you will, that actually helps to show the glory and purity and integrity of their prem. And again, especially this verse, the supreme position of the gopis is highlighted, established in that they achieved the rare mercy of being embraced around their necks by the arms of Krishna during the Rasa-lila. A very unique favor that Lakshmi did not attain. This statement also implies that among all auspicious events, Rasa-lila is the most excellent. The Rasa-lila, which is the apex, the climax of the Bhagavat, basically, the ultimate converging point in terms of rasa. At the same time, it shows the highest degree of achievement by the gopis, the position of Shri Radha in particular. So the fact that the gopis and not Lakshmi were the ones participating in Rasa-lila shows the gopis' superiority to her. And we know the famous story that is mentioned briefly, hinted at in the Bhagavatam and other Bhakti Shastras. Lakshmi wanted to attain Rasa-lila, Krishna in the Rasa-lila, but she was not able to do so. So I will finish briefly sharing this story that mostly all of you know, but Antya-lila says we should develop unquenched thirst for continuing here in this pastime, same pastime, which are never the same over and over again. So this has to do with Mahaprabhu also going to South India, visiting Venkatapata, the head priest of the Rangam temple, Sri Sampradaya, and asking him in a jolly mood why it is that Lakshmi wanted to join Krishna and leave Narayan, his Lord and Master, and wanted to enter Rasa-lila. Is that not fault in her chastity? And of course, Venkata said, no, there's no fault because between Krishna and Narayan, there's no difference in tattva, metaphysical truth. They are the same person. The only difference is according to bhava, emotional disposition. So she's not going to someone else. So Mahaprabhu said, that's perfect, great, nice. But why she was not able to access the Rasa-lila? Why she didn't succeed? So Venkata didn't know what to say. He said, only someone who can ask such a question can reply to it. So the story, of course, as we know, is that Lakshmi, and as my Guru Maharaj used to tell it, Lakshmi is performing stream, tapasya, and Belvan. She's the royal lady per excellence, the standard of imperial and royal standards in Vaikuntha, majestic lady, queen, wearing silk sari, everything is cooked in ghee, whatever she is, but now he's using a totally not very nice white sari, old sari, eating roots and grass and fruits from the forest. So Krishna sees her and says, Lakshmi, what are you doing in such disposition here? She says, I'm executing tapas in order to gain some merit, some credit, some sukriti, so I can enter your Rasa-lila. And Krishna says, but that's not the process. That's not the sadhana for accessing there. So she inquires, so what's the practice for entering this? And to Lakshmi's dismay, Shri Krishna says, well, first of all, you have to leave Narayan, your husband. Then you have to enter Braj, marry one Gopa there, Rajavasi, leave that second husband, and then join me in Parakiya for the Rasa-lila. So, of course, for Lakshmi's abhiman or sense of being, this was too much. She was not able to conceive the first stage of the whole process, leaving Narayan. What to speak of having another husband, leaving that husband, joining Krishna in Rasa-lila. So to say that she was not able to embrace that instruction, which has to do with threading the path of Raga, Marg, Raga Nunga Bhakti, is about following the footsteps of the Brajavasis. And therefore, to this day, it is said that she still remains in Belgaum, practicing tapasya without ever having the chance of entering Rasa-lila. In other words, this story also wants to make this point. There is a very particular, specific way of entering this very particular and specific goal called Madhurya Bhav, this particular specific lila called Rasa-lila. It's not just whatever you do, whatever you like, and you are there. No, there's a particular way, and if you are not willing to follow that way, you will end up being there. So we shouldn't be naive thinking, I do whatever I like without becoming too specific in my sadhana, and I will reach that the ultimate converging point, which is too specific, called Rasa-lila, whatever, and the lila. No, we have to become specific ourselves to reach such a specific goal. So in this way, Rasa-lila is praised and the gopis are praised in contrast, in comparison with Lakshmi. So this is the third verse of this Uddhava Gita. So in these three first verses, we have seen Uddhava is praising, again, ecstatically crying, falling to the ground like a drunkard, the position of the gopis first by stating they have attained the ultimate potential of every attainment possible in human life, which is conquered by all great personalities, those who are liberated, those who hunger for liberation, ourselves, for someone who has such a taste, what's the use of being born as Brahma or whatever. And even though the gopis seem to be corrupted by deviation, adulterous woman, actually the so-called adultery is the highest goal to be attained. And I am receiving the mercy of associating with them by Krishna's causeless grace, who is showing his grace like a powerful medicine, even though I do not understand too much what's going on. He's putting me close to them, and by smelling that and being cured and awakened. And here in this last verse, third verse, last from today, Uddhava is praising the gopis under Rasa Lila in comparison to Lakshmi as the highest Lila, and themselves as the highest Lakshmis, attaining something which the goddess of fortune herself could not attain. So I will finish here today. Sorry for my extension. In the next class, we will continue studying the 3 remaining verses, and of course some other sections of the Bhagavatam, but the 3 remaining verses from the Bhramara-gita as well. And as we are recording this meeting, and I will continue recording them till the end of our series, in this case, there, unfortunately, I have no chance of receiving live your questions. But if you have any questions, you can share them in the Tattva Vivek forum or in the different places where I will be sharing this video online, and we can continue speaking along the week. Thank you so much for your time and presence and patience as usual. See you next week. And I offer my pranava ending this session like Uddhava did before leaving Braj, putting his head to the ground, to the last feet of the gopis, whose Harikatha so powerful it has the potential of purifying the entire world. So we pray having that hope in our hearts. Bandinanda Brajasvinam Padarenu Navikshnasaja Samharikatodgitam Punati Bhunat. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Srimad Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Grantara Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Sri Bhramara Gītā ki jai, Gaur Bhakta-vrinda ki jai, Gaur Pramananda Haribo. Vancha Kalpatarubhischa Kripa Sindhubhye Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Hari.